I think I've unmuted myself. Thanks, Karthik, for taking the meeting. Thank you, everyone, being a service today. My name's Izaak, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. Um, Before I start, I just want to say massive welcome to anybody new to AA or new to the 12 steps, back from a relapse or struggling. We have a solution on offer here, and you never have to drink again. I'm really happy and really feel very honored and privileged to be sharing an AA meeting based in India today. So just to qualify myself quickly, I drank from the ages of 11 to 25. Drinking almost killed me multiple times. When I got to a point where I wanted to stop, I couldn't. And I reached a place where I couldn't stop drinking, but I couldn't carry on either. And it was then I was introduced to the 12 steps, to this big book that we work through. And I had a spiritual experience that I'm going to be talking about today. It's the topic of today's meeting. I had a vital spiritual experience which removed the obsession to drink alcohol from me. But just to bring it back a little bit, I spent from the ages of 3 to 10 years old, I spent most of my childhood in India, in a little town in the north in the Himalayas called Manali. And it was there I was introduced to the idea of spirituality and introduced to the idea of a power greater than myself. Um, it's not something at the time I felt relevant to my life until I got introduced to the 12 steps and this idea of a spiritual experience to overcome this problem that I was struggling with. Translate.
థ్యాంక్ యూ దట్ వాస్ పర్ఫెక్ట్. యా. సో ఆయన పేరు ఐజాక్ అండి. ఆయన ఒక త్రాగుబోతు. సో ఆయన ధన్యవాదాలు చెప్తున్నారు ఈ మీటింగ్ కి ఆహ్వానించుకున్నందుకు. ఆయన అదే బ్రిస్టల్ యూకేలో ఉంటారు. ఆయన సోబ్రైటీ డేట్ వచ్చి మార్చి 28, 2022. సో ఆయన ఏంటంటే ఇండియాలో కూడా చిన్నప్పుడు పెరిగారు. హిమాలయాల్లో ఒక ఊర్లో పెరిగారు ఆయన. సో అది అప్పుడే నాకు ఆధ్యాత్మికత గురించి కొంచెం పరిచయం అయింది చిన్నప్పుడు అని చెప్తున్నారు. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్ ఐజ్.
Thank you. So as I was saying, I spent a lot of my childhood in an ashram in India, where and throughout this time I was around people walking a spiritual way of life. And then from the ages of 11 to 12, I spent time in South America with people practicing a different spiritual way of life. In between all of that, I had a family member who was a member of a religious denomination in the UK. So I had a lot of exposure to the concept of God or a power greater than myself growing up. It wasn't something that was alien to me, but it never felt like something that applied to me. It never felt like something that I needed or wanted in my life. And then at 11 years old, I discovered alcohol, and it did something for me. It did something for me that I didn't know needed to be done for me until I started drinking. And what I mean by that is I started drinking, and suddenly I had this overwhelming feeling that all of this tenseness and uneasiness and discomfort that I had no awareness of up until that point, it was removed from me instantly. And it just progressed from there. I'm not going to go into a big war story about my drinking. If you're on this meeting, I imagine what brought you here, what happens when we drink, right? The consequences and stuff it gets into. But what ended up happening over the next 10 years is I within a few years I became a daily drinker. A few years after that, I became physically dependent on alcohol. I started having withdrawals. A few days before my 21st birthday, I had my first seizure as the result of my alcohol consumption that almost killed me and put me in hospital. And when I share that, my head always goes to if I wasn't an alcoholic, I imagine something like that would be the turning point of almost died because of my drinking, so I stopped drinking. But because of the nature of what I suffer with, and I'll go into this in a minute, that experience of almost dying as the result of my drinking, that was like the beginning of the next 6 years, 5, 6 years of my drinking. After that, those experiences of almost dying and seizures and more detoxes just became more and more and more frequent. And it wasn't until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and started to go through our 12-step program of recovery that I started to get an understanding of what I suffer with, the powerlessness which centers around the first step of our program. Translate.
షూర్. సో ఆయన చెప్పినట్టు ఇందాక సుమారుగా 10 ఏళ్ళు వయసు దాకా ఒక ఆశ్రమంలోనే పెరిగారు ఇండియాలో. దాని తర్వాత సౌత్ ఆఫ్రికా వెళ్ళారు. అక్కడ కూడా వాళ్ళ క్లోజ్ ఫ్యామిలీ మెంబరు ఒక రిలీజియన్ లో ఉండేవారు, ఒక మతంలో. అక్కడ కూడా అది వేరే టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఆధ్యాత్మికత ఉండేది సౌత్ ఆఫ్రికాలో. దానికి కూడా ఉండింది ఎక్స్పోజర్. సో దేవుడు అన్న కాన్సెప్ట్ ఏమి కొత్త కాదు, చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి పెరిగారు దేవుడు అన్న కాన్సెప్ట్. కాకపోతే ఏంటంటే ఆల్కహాలిక్స్ అనానమస్కి వచ్చి 12 సోపానాలు చేసాక అది వేరేగా ఉంది. సో ఈయనకి ఫస్ట్ లో అందరూ, నేను నా తాగుడు జీవితం గురించి ఎక్కువ మాట్లాడను, ఎందుకంటే అందరం ఇక్కడ ఉన్నామంటేనే త్రాగుడు వల్ల బాధపడి వచ్చాం. ఇదంతా ఏంటంటే త్రాగితే స్టార్టింగ్ లో అప్పుడప్పుడు తాగేవాడిని, మెల్లిగా సీజర్స్ అంటే ఫిట్స్ లో వచ్చేది. నా 21వ పుట్టినరోజు ముందు మొదటిసారి నాకు ఫిట్స్ వచ్చింది. కాకపోతే నేను అప్పటికి ఆపలేదు, ఆల్కహాలిక్స్ అనానమస్కి వచ్చేదాకా ఆపలేదు. అలాగే త్రాగుతూ పోయాను. అలాగే ఎన్నోసార్లు నాకు షీజర్స్ ఫిట్స్ వచ్చింది. సో ఇవన్నీ అలా ముందుకి సాగుతూ వెళ్ళే కొద్దీ ఏంటంటే ఇవన్నీ కూడా ఎక్కువైనాయి తప్ప కాన్సిక్వెన్సెస్ అంటారు, అంటే పరిణామాలు, త్రాగుడు వల్ల పరిణామాలు ఎక్కువైనాయి తప్ప తక్కువ అవ్వలేదు. ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి ఎప్పుడైతే నేను ఈ ఆల్కహాలిక్స్ అనానమస్కి వచ్చి 12 సోపానాలు చేసేదాకా నా నా ఏంటంటే ఏమీ కూడా ఆగలేదు ఈ పరిణామాలు అని చెప్తున్నారు. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్.
Thanks, Karthik. So as I was powerlessness. So it wasn't until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and got a sponsor and started to read through the first few chapters of our book. It's this blue book that I'm holding, that I was able to put some context to my behaviors and my inability to leave drinking alone. So the first thing I was pointed to was this idea that I suffer bodily from an abnormal reaction to alcohol and things that alter my state of being. And what that looked like for me in my drinking is attempts to control amounts of alcohol or control the amount of time I would be drinking. So I would say, okay, I'm only going to drink this amount, or I'm only going to drink for this many hours or this many days. And whatever ended up happening usually didn't meet that attempt at control. Towards the end, it didn't meet it at all. But throughout the progression of my drinking, I was very rarely ever able to stick to whatever preconceived idea of what my drinking would look like. And so that led to the consequences to my physical health and hospital visits and the behaviors of things I would do when I was drunk and all of that stuff, the harmful behavior. And our book describes this as an allergy, which was explained to me as an abnormal physical reaction, a reaction that's different than people who don't suffer from what I suffer with. And the next thing I was pointed to, because if my problem was just that, was my issue of control over amounts, then my solution to that problem would be to not trigger the allergy, to not trigger the reaction. The same way if I was allergic to a cat, I wouldn't pick up a cat and rub it all over my body and face. However, my experience shows me that I always drink again. An experience that comes to mind around this, the first drink, the insanity preceding the first drink. I'll tell this story because I already mentioned it. When I came to in hospital after my first seizure as the result of my drinking, I was told I was minutes away from death. I was told um, I was told if I hadn't been found by the paramedics when I was found, I wouldn't be in the hospital bed. I wouldn't be alive. And they got everything out of my system, and it was painful and it was really scary. And I just remember being in a lot of fear and a lot of pain. However, once everything was taken out of my system 6 hours later, the first thing I did is talk my way out of the hospital. I discharged myself. I found some money in my pocket that someone put in as I was being put into the ambulance. And I found a train station near the hospital in this strange town I've never been to before. I jumped on this train. I go back to where I was staying and I break back into a festival. And within 20 minutes of doing that, I'm drinking again. Because my problem that centers in my mind, it centers in my thinking. There's a part of our book that says we lack the kind of defense. The alcoholic lacks the same kind of defense as one has, like a child, from putting their hand on a hot stove. And I have direct experience of that. When I was a child, I've got this scar. You won't see it on camera, but I've got this scar on the back of my hand because when I was a child, I was at a family member's house playing with a fire, and I was playing with melted plastic, and some of the melted plastic flipped off of the fire and fell onto my hand, and I had to rip it off. And it was really painful. However, since that experience at 7 years old, I never played with plastic on an open fire. But that experience of me discharging myself from the hospital just to start drinking again happened again, happened again, and again, and again. Because the needed power for me to bring into my memory whatever happened last time isn't there. It doesn't exist for me. Or it exists at certain times, but then at other times it doesn't. And all it takes is the times that it doesn't for me to start another spree, to go through yet another cycle of drinking, of harm, of getting to a place where life is completely hopeless, so I swear off it, and then I repeat the cycle all over again. And this is because I don't have the power in and of myself to stop. I'll leave it there for you to translate, Karthik.
థ్యాంక్ యూ. సో త్రాగుబోతాను నేను 21 ఏళ్ళకి నేను సీజర్ వచ్చి ఫిట్స్ వచ్చి పడిపోయాను, హాస్పిటల్లో లేచానని చెప్పాను కదా. అది ఏంటంటే దాదాపుగా చావుకు దగ్గర వెళ్ళాను. పారామెడిక్స్ అంటే నన్ను హాస్పిటల్ తీసుకెళ్ళాలి కూడా చెప్పారు. ఏంటంటే భయ్యా నువ్వు టైంకి నువ్వు హాస్పిటల్ రావడానికి చచ్చిపోయింది కూడా నిమిషాల్లో. సో ఏంటి నేను ఎప్పుడు ఏమనుకునేవాడినంటే ఏదో విధంగా నేను కంట్రోల్ చేద్దాం, 2-3 పెగ్గులు తక్కువ తాగాలి, ఏదో విధంగా తక్కువ తాగాలని చాలా ప్రయత్నించాను. ఎప్పుడు ప్రయత్నించినా సరే ఫెయిల్ అయ్యాను. ఎందుకంటే అలర్జీ పెట్టింది. ఎప్పుడు ప్రయత్నించినా ఫెయిల్ అయ్యాను. ఈసారి వేరేగా ఉంటుంది అని ఎలా ప్రయత్నించాను, కాకపోతే ప్రతిసారి ఫెయిల్ అయ్యాను. ఇది ఏంటంటే ఒకసారి మామూలుగా మనకు పడదు అని తెలిసిన దాని నుంచి దూరంగా ఉంటాం. నాకు ఒకవేళ పిల్లులు ఇంట్లో ఉంటే నాకు అలర్జీ ఉందనుకోండి, పిల్లిని మొహానికి వేసి రుద్దుకోండి, దూరంగా ఉంటాను. అలాగే ఆ, నాకు చిన్నప్పుడు ఏమైందంటే ప్లాస్టిక్ ఆడుతుంటే చెయ్యి కాలింది, బాగా కాలింది. ప్లాస్టిక్ కాల్చి ఆడుతుంటే అప్పటి నుంచి నేను ఎప్పుడు ప్లాస్టిక్ మళ్ళీ కాల్చి ఆడలేదు. దానికి దూరంగా ఉన్నాను అలాంటి విషయాలు. కాకపోతే ఇలా నాకు చావు నుంచి నేను కొంచెం దూరంలో ఉన్నాను అని చెప్పినా, తాగుడు చెప్పినా నేను దాని నుంచి దూరంగా ఉండలేకపోయాను. మళ్ళీ మళ్ళీ ఫిక్స్ చేస్తాను. ఎందుకంటే అదే నా అబ్సెషన్. మళ్ళీ మళ్ళీ చేస్తా అదే పని, అదే తప్పు మళ్ళీ చేస్తా అని చెప్తున్నా. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్.
Thanks. So I've got a physical allergy to alcohol. Got an abnormal reaction to alcohol. I've also got this mental obsession. And no matter what I do or try to do or try not to do, the thought ends up coming into my head that it will be different, that I can take a drink, that I can control my drinking, that I will enjoy my drinking, any mix, whatever the lie of the week is, right? It's kind of irrelevant. It leads me to drinking. And then on top of both of those things, I suffer from this human condition, this spiritual malady. And I can only speak from my experience around this, but this was something that I really suffered with and untreated would continue to suffer with this without anything in my system, without any alcohol, just Izaak being Izaak, without any alternate solution in his life. I am in pain most of the time. I'm unhappy. I'm afraid. Things are never enough. I want all of these things in life, but if I ever get them, they're never enough. I'm uncomfortable 99% of the time, untreated. And so all those things together, I'm a hopeless alcoholic. I drink as a solution, but then that solution stops working, but then I can't stop drinking. That kind of sums up my drinking career. So by the age of 25, I'm a solo drinker, living in a moldy flat in the middle of the city that I'm from. I would come to withdrawing, I would drink to pass out. I would come to withdrawing, I would drink to pass out continuously. Those were my days in my the last patch of my drinking and active alcoholism. And I reached a point where I tried a period of abstinence one more time after another hospital visit, another series of seizures. And it was just so painful. Just not drinking was so painful. And I remember having the thought that if this was all that life had to offer, was either I drink till I die, or I don't drink and I'm in this much pain for the rest of my life until I die. I might as well drink because at least then there's moments of numbness. And that was how unwell I was. I conceded to the fact I wasn't going to make it to 30 years old, and it was okay. Just how much can I put in my body now? How much can I put in my body? And so I drink again. And I had this was the last spree I ever ended up having. And by the grace of God, hopefully the last drinking spree I'll ever have. And it wasn't the worst in the terms of amounts. It wasn't the worst in terms of the harm caused to others, although there was a lot consumed and there was a lot of harm to others done during this 3-week period. However, something happened internally. I can only really describe it as the fight gave up. The fight for me to manage and control, it just went. I could feel my, whatever you want to call it, spirit or life force or self-will, it just something went and I didn't have the fight in me anymore. I couldn't carry on, but I couldn't stop either. And at this very specific moment in time of desperation and despair, two people I've known since I was 2 years old, they broke into my where I lived because they thought I'd passed away. from my drinking, and they found me in this in this mess. And the only thing I really remember is coming to with these people standing over me, and something happening where my mouth opened and these words started to come out that I didn't seem to be saying. Whether that was because I was delirious from all the drinking, I'm not sure, but I just remember coming to and these words coming out saying, I can't stop drinking. I can't stop drinking. I haven't been able to stop for a very long time. I need some help. I think I'm going to die.
Okay, let me translate that. Yeah. సో ఈయన ఏంటంటే 21వ ఏడుకి తెలిసిన నెక్స్ట్ 25 దాకా ఆపలేదు. కాబట్టి ఇంకా ఘోరంగా అయిపోయింది. లాస్ట్ లో ఎలా అయిపోయిందంటే తాగుతున్నారు, విడ్రాల్స్ లోకి వస్తున్నారు, లెగిస్తున్నారు, విడ్రాల్స్ లోకి వస్తున్నారు, మళ్ళీ తాగుతున్నారు. కంటిన్యూస్ ప్రాసెస్ అయిపోయింది. లాస్ట్ 3 వారాలు అయితే అసలు ఇంకా అదే ఎలా బతుకున్నారో కూడా తెలియదు. కాకపోతే ఏంటంటే ఇంకా మొత్తం లైఫ్ అంతా ఒక మెస్ లా తయారైంది. అంతా చండాలం అయిపోయింది. అలా అయిపోయాక కూడా ఈయన ఏంటంటే మళ్ళీ ఇది ఒకటే పని అనుకోండి, తాగటం, మళ్ళీ రావటం, కాన్షియస్నెస్ వచ్చినకి అదే విత్డ్రాల్స్ మళ్ళీ రావడం. లాస్ట్ లో ఎలా అయిపోయిందంటే ఇంకా పూర్తిగా ఈయన పోరాటం ఆగిపోయింది. ఇంకా ఈయన వల్ల అవ్వట్లేదు. కంప్లీట్ మనం ఏదైతే సెల్ఫ్ ఫిల్ అంటామో పూర్తిగా పోయింది. పూర్తిగా పోయి ఇది పూర్తిగా పోయాక ఈయన్ని ఏంటంటే ఎవరో చుట్టాలది ఫ్యామిలీ ఈయన దగ్గరికి వస్తే ఇంకా స్పృహలో లేదు. ఏదో నోరిప్పి ఏమన్నాడో కూడా తెలియదు. స్పృహలో లేడు, నోరు ఏదో నోట్లోంచి ఏదో పడబడుతూ మాటలు వచ్చింది. అది వేరే పవర్ ఏదో మాటలు చెప్పించినట్టు ఈరోజు భావిస్తుంది. కాకపోతే ఏంటంటే కంప్లీట్ గా ఓడిపోయి ఇంకా నా వల్ల కాదు అన్నట్టు మామూలుగా స్పృహలో అన్నారన్నమాట, సగం స్పృహ. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్.
Thanks, Karthik. Okay, now on to the good stuff. So that's kind of my qualifier. So very shortly after that experience, I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And very shortly after that, I got a sponsor. And very shortly after that, after a brief home detox, I started going into the 12 steps. I got one of these books, and this is where I started to have this vital spiritual experience. This is where things started to change. After such a long period of things remaining the same and getting worse, things started to change for the better. So what was put to me after looking at the first step was this idea of a power greater than myself. If I'm without power to stop drinking or remain stopped, then I need to gain access to a power greater than myself. And it's interesting because I had a lot of fear before I came into the rooms about what Alcoholics Anonymous might be in regards to talking about God or reference to God. But then I found when I got to the second step, there's so much in our book that really breaks down any kind of fears that we might have coming in. And the founders were super clear that no one needs to consider anyone else's conception of a power greater than themselves. All that's required is a willingness to seek their own conception, a willingness to seek. Am I willing to seek something bigger than myself? I don't need to consider anyone else's. Just need some willingness, some open-mindedness, and some honesty. And while I'm looking at this step with my sponsor and the subsequent steps, my head just keeps going back to these experiences I had as a child. When I'm being asked to pray and meditate, my head keeps going back to being taught to meditate in an ashram in Manali in the Himalayas, or being in the rainforest with a tribe of people who practice worshipping Mother Earth, or being in church with my grandmother being taught how to pray. And it's like suddenly these breadcrumb trails of a relationship of a power greater than myself um, led to me suddenly kind of having some understanding of using these tools that we use in these rooms. And I do really understand that's not everyone's experience. So again, when I talk about God, I don't talk about necessarily any specific religion or belief. However, if you do have either of those things, there's going to be so much for you here as well as for those who don't. And what started to happen after making a decision to turn my life and my actions and my thinking in the direction of this power that I understand very little at this point, things started to change in a really big way. Up until this moment in the steps, my life had been a series of resisting life around me in order to get what I thought I wanted. Whether that was alcohol, whether that was relationships, money, people's approval, people's love. I have this idea, these grand plans in my head that I need to get the right things in order to be okay. And if I get them, I'm not okay. If I don't get them, I'm not okay. What started to happen through the process of these 12 steps, specifically steps 4 to 9, inventory, confession, willingness to turn over defects and making amends for harms caused, I started to change. I'll pause there, Karthik. Thanks.
థ్యాంక్ యూ. సో అప్పుడు పూర్తిగా ఓటం వచ్చాక మొదట ఆల్కహాలిక్స్ అనానమస్ మీటింగ్కి వెళ్ళి ఇంట్లోనే డీటాక్స్ చేసుకుని బిగ్ బుక్ తీసుకుని ఈ 12 సోపానాలు ఏంటిది కదా అని చెప్పి చూడటం మొదలు. నాకు చాలా వ్యతిరేకత ఉండేది దేవుడు అంటే. కాకపోతే ఎందుకంటే నాకు చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి కాన్సెప్షన్స్ కూడా చాలా ఉన్నాయి. ఏంటంటే కులు మనాలిలో హిమాలయాల్లో మంచిగా కూర్చొని మెడిటేషన్ చేసుకోవటం, లేకపోతే ఇంకా హిమాలయాల్లో లోతులో వెళ్ళిపోయి మదర్ అర్త్ అంటే భూదేవిని దేవుడి కింద అనుకుంటే అలా చేయటం, లేకపోతే మా నాయనమ్మ తను చర్చికి తీసుకెళ్ళి ఎలా ప్రే చేయాలో నేర్పింది, అలా చేయటం. ఏదైనా పర్లేదు, ఏ కన్సెప్షన్ చాలా క్లియర్ గా ఉన్నారు ఫౌండర్స్. ఈ కన్సెప్షన్ ఉండాలి గాడ్ది అని లేదు. నీకన్నా ఒక ఉన్నతమైన శక్తి అంటే ఇలా అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి దేవుడిని లేదు. కన్సెప్షన్ అంటే అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి, ఇలా అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి దేవుడిని లేదు. నువ్వు ఎలాగైనా చేసుకోవాలి. కాకపోతే ఆయన్ని ఆశ్రయించుకోమని సీకండి. నీకంటే ఒక ఉన్నతమైన శక్తి ఏమన్నా ఉంది. అది బ్యూటీ ఈ ప్రోగ్రామ్ లో. సో నాకు అది చాలా ఊరట నచ్చింది. సో రెండో సోపానంలో ఊరట దొరికింది. శక్తి ఏదైనా నాకు అర్థం అవ్వాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. చాలా ఆప్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఒకవేళ మీరు ఏమన్నా మతానికి చెందినవారైనా, మతం అంటే ఆశ్రయించుకునేవారైనా, ఏదైనా ఇద్దరికీ ఉన్నాయి. ఇద్దరికి దారి దొరుకుతుంది. కాకపోతే ఇవన్నీ నాకు ఉపయోగపడి మిగతా టూల్స్ కూడా నేను చిన్నప్పటి నుంచి నేర్చుకున్నా కానీ ఉపయోగపడి ఇంకా అర్థమైంది నేను వెళ్ళే కొద్ది. మూడో సోపానంలో నా ఇచ్చని, నా జీవితాన్ని ఇచ్చేయాలంటే నేను ఎప్పుడు కూడా నా ఇచ్చ ఏంటి, సంపాదించాలి, అవి జరగాలి, జరిగితేనే నేను సంతోషంగా ఉంటాను, అవి జరగకపోతే నేను సంతోషంగా ఉంటాను. అవి జరగాలి అంటే అది నా ఇచ్చ. కాకపోతే అదంతా తప్పు. నా సంతోషం అవి మీద కూడా ఆధారపడి నేను తర్వాత నేర్చుకున్నాను. ఆ రెండు కూడా నేను దేవుడికి ఇచ్చేయగలుగుతాను ఆ, అన్నదే ఇది. కాకపోతే ఈ అనుభవం జరగాలంటే సరిగ్గా 4 నుంచి 10 డేస్ అక్కడ జరుగు అని చెప్తున్నాను. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్ అయ్యి.
Thanks. So change started to happen. And this is the spiritual experience that's promised in our 12 step and throughout our big book. The words normally used throughout our book are spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, psychic change also. And there's a part in the back of the book that I always really like referring to because it explains it much, much better than I ever could. I'm just going to read a bit of it. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself in many different forms. A bit lower in the page, it also talks about a profound alteration in my reaction to life. And this is what started to happen to me. Much to my surprise, in the 4th and 5th step, it wasn't all of you that were the problem. It wasn't the relationships. It wasn't the finances. It wasn't the things I'm afraid of. It wasn't even necessarily the drinking. The drinking was a problem, of course. It wasn't the problem though. It was me the whole time, shock and horror. I'm the problem. And so what's offered through steps 4 to 9 and onwards is a spiritual treatment. And what was explained to me is, Izaak, when as you go through this work and you treat the spirit, you will then start to recover mentally and physically like a domino effect. So I treat the spirit, build a relationship with God, and the obsession to drink is removed. I've got an effective mental defense against the first one. If I've got an effective mental defense against the first thought, then I don't trigger the allergy. If I don't trigger the allergy, I'm not drinking. And this is what started to happen throughout this process. Things became less and less tense. Things became less and less spiky. I started to be able to breathe. I remember these moments in early recovery where I could sit by myself and feel comfortable. That was brand new to me. Even before I started drinking, that was brand new to me. These whispers of God that started to occur as I followed direction in the book, as I got service, as I started to lay the foundations of being able to help other alcoholics. A phrase that I hear used a lot and I love to plagiarize is everything changed, but nothing changed because I was the only one who needed to change. And my direct experience of that is the first 6 months of my sobriety. Nothing external really changed. I was in the same flat I did all my drinking in. I was opposite the same shops that I brought all my alcohol from, on the same street that I was involved with some other shady characters involved in some outside issues. None of that. It changed. It changed naturally as my life began to develop and grow after I started to get well. But how should I word it? My ability to turn my life over to God and to recover was not dependent on those things changing. It just wasn't. And what's on offer with this problem being removed, I started to experience directly as well. I started being presented with these situations where I could have gotten away with drinking. or situations where there was lots of free alcohol available to me, or lots of situations where I could blame the emotional nature of those situations to drink. But there was a separation. After my fourth and fifth step, I felt safe and protected, and the obsession to drink hasn't come back, and that was 2.5 years ago. And that's no, I don't say that as anything to do with me. It's just what's on offer as we go throughout this process, and what's been promised to me by my sponsor, who's an extra 20 and a bit years ahead of me on this journey, by other people further down this path, is that continues to stay true. The obsession can come back if we don't stay plugged into a spiritual way of life and stay close to a God of our understanding, but it never has to. I'll leave you to translate, Karthik.
సో 4-5 సోపానాలు నుంచి 9వ సోపానంలోకి చూస్తే నేను ఆధ్యాత్మిక అనుభవం గురించి చెప్తున్నాను. అపెండిక్స్ 2లో ఉంటుందండి. స్నేహితు గారు కూడా చాట్లో పెట్టారు. ఆధ్యాత్మిక అనుభవం అంటే ఆధ్యాత్మిక అనుభవం, ఆధ్యాత్మిక మేలుకొలుపు అనుభవాలు జరుగుతూ ఉంటాయి. అంటే దేవుడి యొక్క స్పర్శ తెలుస్తూ ఉంటుంది. మేలుకొలుపు అంటే నాలో, నా ప్రవర్తనలో మార్పు. సో కొన్ని రోజుల తర్వాత నాకు అర్థం అవుతుంది నా జీవితం మారిపోయింది. అది నా మొదట 6 నెలల సోబ్రైటీ సాక్ష్యం. ఏ అపార్ట్మెంట్ లో ఉన్నాను, ఎక్కడైతే నేను తాగినా, నా ఎదురుగుండా అయ్యే షాప్ లో నేను మానక ద్రవ్యాలు, అదే ఇతర విషయాలు తీసుకునే వాళ్ళు ఉన్నారు చుట్టుపక్కల, అన్నీ అలాగే ఉంది. అయితే నేను అక్కడికి వెళ్ళాల్సిన అవసరం రాలేదు. నా ప్రవర్తన ఇంతకుముందు ఇంకొక విభాగం ఏంటంటే, జీవితం చాలా సమస్యల్ని మన ఎదురుగా ఉంచుతూ ఉంటుంది. ఇంతకుముందు నేను తాగేసి వాటి నుంచి తప్పించుకుంటున్నాను. ఇప్పుడు తాగకుండా వాటిని ఎదుర్కొంటాను. నాలో మార్పు. నేను 4-5 సోపానాలు రాసినప్పుడే నా తాగాలన్న కాంక్ష, అది అబ్సెషన్ అంటారు కదా, అది తీసివేయబడింది. అది ఏదో నేను గొప్ప చేశానని చెప్పాలి. కాకపోతే ఇదే ప్రామిస్, ఈ సోపానాలు చేస్తే తీసివేయకూడదు. అప్పుడు థాట్ రావచ్చు, మళ్ళీ తిరిగి కూడా రావచ్చు కాంక్ష. నేను ఎప్పుడైతే ఆధ్యాత్మికంగా ఫిట్ గా ఉండను, స్పిరిచువల్ ఫిట్నెస్ మళ్ళీ తిరిగి రావచ్చు. సో ఇది ఏంటంటే, ఇది ప్రామిస్ నాకే కాదు, ఎంతో మంది స్పాన్సర్ ఇచ్చాడు, ఎంతో మంది ఏదో ఇస్తున్నారు. ఆ స్పాన్సర్ నాకంటే ఇంకో 20,000 సోబరు. కాకపోతే ఎంతో మంది వాళ్ళ అనుభవంతో చెప్తున్నారు. సో ఇది మెల్లిగా బుక్లో ఉన్న డైరెక్షన్ ఫాలో అయితే అప్పుడప్పుడు దేవుడి మాటలు కూడా ఉన్నట్టు ఫాలో అయితే క్లియర్ కట్ డైరెక్షన్స్ వస్తాయి అని చెప్తున్నా. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్.
Thanks. So I started to experience this spiritual awakening you guys were talking about. I started to notice this profound change taking place as the result of action that we're given in this beautiful book of ours. And so I go through steps 4 to 9. This change starts to occur, and then it's put to me that, okay, Izaak, now you've learned the tools. Now it's time to now we continue to practice this stuff in our daily lives as we go forward. And something that was emphasized to me very early on that I would like to pass on is the importance of helping others, carrying this message to other alcoholics, and in general being a service to other people. Because, like I said, my life up until the point of being introduced to this way of life was a series of trying to get what I thought I wanted, and it never fulfilled me ever. And then I was taught these spiritual principles and this practice of giving, and something started to happen. Through the practice of giving, I started to receive in life. And what I mean by that is I was given the power to be able to be helpful. So I experienced being helped. I was given the power to be loving. I experienced love. I was given the power to be kind. I experienced kindness. And a major part of that is helping other alcoholics. I was just reading through the 12 step with someone this morning, and we were reading the part of the book that says nothing so much ensures immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when all other measures fail. When everything else fails, help another alcoholic. My mind goes to an experience I had when I was 90 days sober. I'd just gone through, I just finished the 12 step in the book, and there was a guy a similar age to me who, when I came into the rooms, he was about 4 months sober. To me, that was like the king of recovery. I really admired this person. He was someone who came up to me in one of my first meetings when no one was talking to me, and he talked to me and took my number and took me out for coffee. And that meant a lot to me. And we spent a lot of time together. And I get this call when I'm 90 days sober saying that he called me up saying he relapsed, and he was in a lot of fear and he wanted to get to a meeting. So I go find him where he is, and he's in this park in the city, and he's in a really bad way. He's got carrier bags full, multiple carrier bags full of alcohol. He can't stand up, he can't really speak, and he's also got some other things on him. So without really thinking, I was instinctually given the right action to do, which was get him into a taxi, get him out of where he was, and um take him to a meeting, just where somewhere he could sit for an hour while he just like clears his head for a second. And at the meeting, I got some guys had more experience than me at the time, and they made sure he had somewhere to sleep that night, and he had all his stuff on him because he lost all of his things. And I go home after that meeting, and suddenly realize throughout that whole process, the thought to drink hadn't crossed my mind once. I hadn't considered there was multiple carrier bags of alcohol right in front of me. I hadn't considered that he was offering me drinks. I hadn't, it, there was a protection there, the likes of which I'd never experienced in my life. And it was in that moment I began to understand what you guys were talking about when you said, my life depends on the constant thought of others. When you said immunity from drinking is ensured when we work with others. And so it's something I just like to share to anyone who's new or anyone who's struggling. If you've been around for a little bit, this is the answer. It's a 12-step program for a reason, because we're able to work the 12th step throughout the experience we've had of the previous 11 steps. It's it's an experience that's unlike any other, and it doesn't matter if we're a year in, a couple years in, a month, a week. If we've got a seat in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're in a position where we can help someone. And again, I just think back to when I first came in, and I wasn't really able to identify with anyone who had multiple years. as important as it is and as helpful as those people were, the people I really identified with were a couple months, couple weeks. Because I remember thinking, well, I can't get a year, I can't get a decade, but that guy who looks like me, he's got 3 weeks. I might be able to get 3 weeks if I do what he does. I'll leave you to translate, Karthik.
సో మన పుస్తకంలో ఏం రాస్తారంటే ఇంకొక త్రాగుబోతుకి మనం సహాయం చేసే చర్య ఏదైతే ఉంటుందో దానికంటే గొప్పగా మనకి తాగుడు నుంచి దూరంగా పెట్టే చర్య ఏది లేదు. ఆ, దానికి ఇందాక కూడా చెప్పారు ఈయన. ఇతరులకు సహాయం చేయటం తోటి నాకు కాన్షియస్ కాంటాక్ట్ కూడా పెరిగింది. అదే బేసిక్ గా ఈ ఆధ్యాత్మిక మేలుకొలుపు, ఆధ్యాత్మిక అనుభవాలు పెరిగిందండి. ఉమ్, ఏంటంటే ఒక ఉదాహరణ ఇచ్చారు. మొదట్లో వచ్చినప్పుడు ఈయనకు ఒక ఆయన 4 నెలలు సూపర్ గా ఉంటే అసలు ఆయనే పెద్ద సూపర్ హీరో అనుకున్నాడు. 4 నెలల 4 నెలలు సూపర్ గా ఉంటే మళ్ళీ ఆయన రిలాప్స్ అవటం జరిగింది. రిలాప్స్ అయ్యి రోడ్డు మీద పడటం చూసి రకరకాల బాటిల్స్ ఉన్నాయి దగ్గర. ఆ, మళ్ళీ వేరే మానక ద్రవ్యాలు కూడా చేస్తాం. ఈయనకి ఏ ఆలోచన రాలేదు. ఆయన తీసుకెళ్లి మీటింగ్ లో కూర్చోకూడదా అన్న ఆలోచన వచ్చింది ఆటోమేటిక్. ఈయన్ని కారులో ఎక్కిస్తున్నప్పుడు ఆ బాటిల్స్ అది ఈయనకి మందు ఇవ్వటం, మందు ఇదిగో తాగు, నువ్వు కూడా తాగని ఇస్తున్నాను. ఎందుకంటే ఈయనకి తాగాలని ఒక్క ఆలోచన రాదు. ఆయన తీసుకెళ్ళి మామూలుగా మీటింగ్ లో కూర్చొని ప్రొటెక్షన్ అంటే అది. పక్కనోడు తాగని మందు ఇస్తున్నా తాగాలన్న ఆలోచన రాదు. ఎప్పుడు ఇతరులకు సహాయం చేస్తారు. మీరు ఎప్పుడైనా సహాయం చేయొచ్చు ఇతరులు. మీరు ఒకరోజు సూపర్ గా ఉన్నా మీరు వేసేది అవతలోడు చేస్తే ఆ ఒక్కరోజు ఉంటాడు. నేను 10 ఏళ్ళు సూపర్ గా ఉండకపోవచ్చు, కాకపోతే 3 వారాలు సూపర్ గా ఉన్నవాడిని ఆడు ఏం చేస్తున్నాడో అది చేస్తే నేను ఆ 3 వారాలు ఉంటాను సూపర్ గా. సో ఇతరులకి సహాయపడటంలో ఉన్న ప్రొటెక్షన్ ఇంకెక్కడ ఉండదు అన్నట్టు చెప్తున్నాను ఆ సర్వీస్ లో. ప్లీజ్ గో హెడ్.
Thank you. So life today. So today I continue to live the 12 steps. This isn't a course. It's not like a one and done thing I do to complete. It's a way of life I've been taught, and today I try to live that to the best of my ability. And as the result of that, I have a full life today. The good and the bad in the best possible way. This morning, just to compare, this morning I wake up and I'm excited because I've got the day ahead of me. 2 years, 9 months ago, I come to withdrawing, crying because I don't want to be conscious. Today I was able to get out of bed and spend time in quiet with God. Connect to some other alcoholics before leaving my house and starting my day. I've been able to be in the book with a guy who's having his own experience through the steps, and I'm seeing the lights come on behind him. I'm seeing God starting to do for him what he can't do for himself, which is a beautiful thing to be a part of. Today I have relationships in my life with people close to me. I have a close connection with a community of other alcoholics in the city that I live in. I have so much, and I'm not talking about the material. My spirit feels full today. Even in the discomfort, even in the difficulty, even in the pain that life naturally brings. Spiritual principles, the book tells me, is a solution to all of my problems. God is the answer to all of my problems today. What do I mean by that? My dependence as time goes on in this journey is less and less on these things that I think I need to have, and is more upon this power, which ultimately leads back to the same thing. What can you give, Izaak? What can you contribute to life? How can you be helpful? How can this experience that you're going through be useful to someone else rather than sitting in self-pity about it? I don't say I do that perfectly because I definitely don't, but that's the constant solution as time goes on. It always boils back to this singular truth. Is God everything or is God nothing? And the only answer I have for that today is has to be everything. God has to be everything for me. And yeah, just the life available. I hear the words used a lot in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Life beyond my wildest dreams. And when I first heard that, I used to always just think of, well, I'd always try and imagine what that would be, right? Life beyond my wildest dreams. Kind of defeats the purpose of that saying. But today I kind of have an understanding of when people use that, what that means. To me, it means the things I'm able to experience in my life today, including just being able to sit in peace and quiet and feel comfortable, is beyond anything I could have ever imagined before I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I came in here because I couldn't stop drinking and it was killing me, and that problem has been removed today. But so much more than this new life has been constructed around me, like a sense of peace and purpose in the face of the adversity that life brings. I feel safe and protected from alcohol. And I feel I just feel the love deep in my spirit, and I'm so grateful for you guys, for members of AA, for the teachers that I've had on this journey, for showing me this way of life. And I'm not unique. I'm one of many thousands of stories who've had the same experience. This is on offer to anyone and everyone. The same way that us alcoholics share the problem of alcoholism, we also share the solution of recovery, which is for me was a spiritual experience as the result of the 12-step program and living the principles that entails. Um, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'll leave that for you to translate, Karthik, and I'll end it there. Thank you.
థ్యాంక్ యూ. సో ఈ రోజు జీవితం ఎలా ఉందంటే అసలు వచ్చాక ప్రేమ జీవితం ఎన్ని అదే ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ ఇచ్చిన సమస్యలు ఇచ్చిన జీవితం బాధ కూడా ఇస్తుంది. ఆ బాధలో కూడా కంటెంట్మెంట్ అంటే తృప్తి ఉంది. నాకు బయటకి ప్రేమ దయ చూపిస్తే నాకు ప్రేమ దయ ఎలా వచ్చింది. దేవుడు నేను చేయలేని పనులు చేసి పెడుతున్నాను. చాలా విషయాల్లో ఏంటంటే నాకు ఆయన స్పర్శ తెలుస్తుంది. ఆ తృప్తి ఉంది ఈరోజు కంటెంట్మెంట్ అంటే. నేనేం పర్ఫెక్ట్ కాదండి, కాకపోతే 12 సోపానాలు ఏం డిగ్రీ కూడా కాదు, చేస్తూ ఉండాలి రోజువారీ కార్యక్రమం చేస్తుంటే. ఈరోజు నాకు రిలేషన్షిప్స్ అంటే మానవ సంబంధాలు మెరుగుపడ్డాయి. ఈరోజు మీరంతా ఉన్నారు. ఇంకా ఇంతకుముందు నాకు అయ్యి కావాలి అనుకునేవాడిని. అప్పుడే నేను సంతోషంగా ఉంటాను అంటే అలా జరిగితే అలా జరిగితే ఇప్పుడు ఏమీ అక్కర్లే. ఎప్పుడు కూడా క్వశ్చన్ దానికి వస్తుంది, దేవుడు ఎన్ని లేకపోతే ఏమీ కాదు, అక్కడికి వచ్చి ఆగుద్ది క్వశ్చన్. నాకు ఈరోజు ఉండాల్సిన దేవుడు, ఇంకేమీ కాదు. సో ఆ క్వశ్చన్ దగ్గర ఎప్పుడు నేను ఆగుతాను. బయట మెటీరియల్ ఏమున్నా లేకపోయినా, ఏం జరిగినా ఏం జరగకపోయినా, ఈ దేవుడి యొక్క అనుభవం, దేవుడు ఎన్ని అనుకోవటం తోటి నాకు ఉండేది తృప్తి, ఆనందం వస్తుంది. సో ఇలా చెప్తూ మనం ఈ మీటింగ్కి ఇన్వైట్ చేసినందుకు థ్యాంక్ యూ చెప్పుకుంటూ సెలవు తీసుకుంటున్నారండి. థ్యాంక్ యూ, Isaac. Now we'll open the floor for some question and answers. Snehit, can you take over from here, please?